We are recording. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to introduce Jake Miller from Return Home. He's our guest presenter this morning. He's here to provide educational webinar on a subject that is most people don't know about, and we appreciate Jake being here this morning and all his efforts getting ready for this webinar. Thank you, Jake, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Chris. Yeah, and thank you to all the board members and all the attendees this morning that are willing to listen to me talk for the next 30, 45 minutes on this relatively new subject. So as mentioned here, we'll have time for questions at the end of the presentation. I do recommend people write down questions as we're going through this presentation. We tend to be very in-depth on doing these presentations. We'll be covering a few different subjects from the history of terramation or composting, specifically about return home. We'll be going very in depth on the process of how that all works and kind of what that all entails, especially for the state of California coming up here, hopefully in 2027. So, with that, I'm going to try to share. Oh, Chris, could you turn on participant screen sharing?
Sure. Do you know, Jake, if it's in the advanced settings?
That is a great question.
I know how to make you the host, which would give you that opportunity, and then you would just release it later. Let me see if I can find.
See if I can find in the settings here. Share screen. Quite sure. If we're not able to find it, then we can switch over to have me to be the host just for the screen share, and then I can jump it back over to you.
Okay, let me close this.
Should work with making co-host.
Let me try that.
Does it give that option in the little three dots in his square?
The problem is I don't see his three dots.
Well, I don't know how to take this apart to clean the filter,
Let's see.
which are way overdue. Because I assume they're in here.
Can you do it from the participants list?
They're troubleshooting. Let me take this out.
Okay,
I wanna.
That might work.
thank you. I'm getting dressed.
Okay, one thing I need to do before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody. Okay, mute all current. And now, Jake, I am going to make you the host. Or I can make you a co host. Here you go. How's that?
Let's take a look here. Okay, perfect. Yep.
Sorry for the delay, everybody.
Yeah. Technical difficulties. AI could not help with that one.
No.
Okay, let's see. Shit. Got a handful of these different ones. There we go. And is everybody seeing my screen here?
Yes.
Beautiful. Okay. So everybody can see the dirt on NOR that's popping up for everybody.
Yes.
Beautiful. All right. Well, without further delay here, let's get started. Today we'll be covering the subject of natural organic reduction, also known as human composting, soil transformation, terramation, all different names for the same thing. All in all, this is a form of service that is completely unique and is a standalone option from our more traditional options of cremation and burial. The simple overview is it is a simple and natural way of allowing our body to naturally decompose and return our bodies back into the earth after we die. Currently, this is a service legal in 14 states, with another 12 states that are working on legislation. And the end result of this available option for families is a little bit different than what we're used to with things like cremation and burial. The end result of somebody undergoing the terramation process, that individual becomes about 500 pounds of remains or soil afterwards, or about 1 cubic yard. So this was initially made available back in Washington State back in 2019. Washington was the first place in the world to legalize this option about 6 or 7 years ago now. A gal by the name of Katrina Spade was a big pusher to have this option legalized in Washington. And as Washington was looking at a new form of disposition, a big reason for that was looking for greener alternatives. As with things with like cremation, that takes up a lot of fossil fuels to have somebody undergo cremation. And with the options like traditional casket burial, you have considerations of permanent land usage as well as a decent amount of materials that are used for the outer burial container for the casket. So Washington was looking at just a simple option to return our bodies back to the earth without using a lot of energy or a lot of resources to be able to do that. Throughout this presentation, I'll be using the term terramation, which literally just means the motion of becoming earth. The legal term for what we do is natural organic reduction. But we decided to come up with our own term to be able to use for this option, as NOR, natural organic reduction, is a bit of a mouthful. And when you tell somebody you're doing natural organic reduction, people tend to just look at you with a blank stare and just say, congratulations on the new diet. It doesn't really explain a whole lot. Whereas on the other side of that coin, you have the term human composting. It is very literal, very visceral. Some people love that term, whereas for other people, that might be a little bit rough around the edges. So we decided to kind of meet in the middle of those two issues and come up with this term, as it is very literal, but it also, is kind of nicer around the edges to use that term. Same reason, frankly, that the term cremation is used. We don't say human incineration. We have a different term for it. So we did the same thing with terramation as well. So that's going to be the term that I use throughout this presentation. So starting from beginning to end, we're going to be going through how terramation all works. So we use what we call the Terramation vessel, and I'll have quite a few photographs of our facility, of the process coming up here. But we start with what we call the laying in one of our Terramation vessels. All we use is three base organic materials of alfalfa, straw, and sawdust. There's no chemicals, there's no other types of inoculants. It's all natural organic uses and materials that we use in the terramation vessel with somebody's body after they have died. So the reason that we use those three organics is the alfalfa is rich in nitrogen, and that acts like an energy source. Think of it like your cup of coffee in the morning. It kind of helps get things going. It's simply just an energy source for the microbes in our body, which is what facilitates us returning back to the earth. The straw helps with insulation, as temperature is a very important factor in any type of composting, and we're no different there, that we do have temperature requirements, both legally and biologically, that we want to be hitting and staying at certain temperature points, and I'll be covering that in a little bit here. And then for the sawdust, we use a heavy layer of sawdust at the bottom of one of our vessels because our body is a lot of water and a lot of moisture. So we use a heavier layer of the sawdust to help offset any moisture issues. So we start with a base layer of those three base organics. And here is a photo of our service space for families that want to join us for that time. And up at the front is one of our Terramation vessels. So we'll start with the three base organics, place them at the bottom of that vessel up at the front, and we usually do that about a quarter way high inside that vessel. Afterwards, we'll then place that person to put them on top of that bed of organics. And then, depending on if folks want to join us during that time, we have a lot of families that will join us. They want to see their person in their vessel, place in flowers, cheap scotch, jelly beans, frozen wedding cake. They want to decorate the outside of the vessel. So, this is an opportunity for folks that would like to be hands-on, would like to kind of participate. This is an opportunity to be able to do that. And then afterwards, we will then take another layer of those three organics, the alfalfa, the straw, the sawdust, and place those organics over that person. So from bottom to top, it goes organics at the bottom, person in the middle, and then another layer of those organic materials on top of them. From that point, and here's another close-up shot of one of our vessels that was decorated. After we have placed that second layer of organics, we're now going to close that vessel and then place that person in whatever spot they're going to be staying at return home for the next anywhere from 30 to 60 days. And all that we have to do in that time is just monitor the temperature and the airflow inside of that vessel. What happens within about 72 hours of somebody going into their vessel, the temperature naturally warms up to about 140 to 150 degrees Fahrenheit. That's no artificial heat whatsoever. That's just the microbial activity from our bodies starting to get very active and starting to transition and transform our body after we've died. So it'll stay at that higher temperature point for about 2 to 3 weeks. And then we'll start to see we have an electronic monitoring system that tracks how all of our families are doing in that first phase. And after 2 to 3 weeks, we'll watch that temperature start to drop back down below 131 degrees is kind of our monitor point. And at which point, when we see that temperature has dropped, we're going to now remove that vessel and do a full 360-degree rotation of that entire vessel. So, for anybody here that if you do backyard composting, if you've done it in the past, every once in a while you'll rotate your compost pile. This is the same exact concept, really, all of this is. And when you do that rotation, it reactivates the microbial activity once again, which all in all takes about 10 minutes. We'll then take that vessel back out, hook that back up to our monitoring system, and then watch that temperature start to go back up again. Then a week or two later, temperature will drop for a second time. We'll go and do another rotation, see if that temperature goes up. But all in all, we'll do maybe two or three of those rotations per individual. But of course, the reality is, as we're living, we're all very different, and it is the same when we die that we're all different as well. So we just let that temperature tell us and that nature tell us when our body is finishing our transformation in that time. So all in all, we'll keep track of that temperature for anywhere from a month to 2 months, which then brings us to the second phase. So after a month or two, when we see that the temperature has dropped for the final time, we're now going to go through what we call the screening. So we're going to empty that vessel first to remove anything inorganic. So for anybody here that if you have hip implants, spinal rods, screws, staples, knee replacements, anything like that, there we go. Yep, that will then be removed and medically recycled, unless folks want those back, which isn't very common, but it is an option. So we'll remove any of those inorganic materials from our body, because of course titanium doesn't naturally break down very well. And then what you're still left over with, while the soft parts of our body have completely transformed into soil, you're still left over with any longer bone from our body. So any longer bone that's still left over after that first month to 2 months, that will be mechanically broken down to about a 2 inch consistency. The reason that we do that is on the outside of our bone, it's very long, it's very smooth, it's very hardy. Microbes have a tough time being able to do anything with that. Hence why we find skeletal remains after thousands and thousands of years. To oversimplify it, essentially what that means is microbes ran out of ability to do their job because they didn't have any access points to the inside of the bone where it's porous, you have bone marrow. So after we've gone through that mechanical breakdown of that longer bone, we now place all of the soil into this secondary vessel for the last 4 weeks. And now what is happening in that last 4 weeks, we just let that soil sit and cure. And now those microbes are given access to the inside of the bone, where microbes can completely break down any bone fragment from there. And so, all in all, between the first phase, which is again about month to 2 months, and then the second phase, which is a very consistent 1 month, all in all, this takes about 60 to 90 days on average. And then the end result, as I had mentioned earlier, is worth a conversation or a dozen with families. That there's a lot that comes from terramation. So what you're seeing, this is somebody's soil that was getting ready to go back home to a family. This is all one person. So it's typically anywhere from 12 to 20 of those larger bags that we return somebody's soil back in. And each of those bags is usually about 20 to 25 pounds each. So it's usually between 400 to 500 pounds of soil, or about 1 cubic yard. So families at that point have the ability to take as much or as little of their person's soil back home as they would like. It's very frequent that families will use that soil to plant trees or rose bushes, scatter it in the garden in the backyard, take it to favorite campgrounds and fishing sites. We'll still have some families that will take their soil to a cemetery if that's something that's important to them. And a lot of our families, because there's a lot of soil to distribute, we can package that soil into smaller bags if folks want to give that out to different family members and friends that everybody can go and do something different. Um, that being said, one of our surprises, which we had many when we started back in 2019 and opened in 2021, one of our big surprises was that 70% of our families, including all the out-of-state families that we serve, will take the full amount of their person's soil. We thought most families would take maybe just a smaller portion because this might be a little bit overwhelming. But we were amazed to see how many people wanted to bring back the full amount of their person's soil back home with them. In the occasional event that families can't or they don't want to take the full portion of their person's soil, we do have an 8 acre green belt, about 20 minutes from return home, which I'm not sure if I covered this, but we have one facility right now up here in Auburn, Washington, about 25 minutes away from Seattle and the Seattle Tacoma International Airport. But our woodlands, we're able to donate soil there for families if they can't or don't want to take that full amount of soil. That helps revitalize that local flora and fauna. So even if families aren't going to take the full portion, we're still able to make use of that soil to help return that back to the planet. All right, so a few important factors when it comes to terramation. Really, the biggest one is that no form of embalming or usage of formaldehyde can be used in terramation. So, for anybody that doesn't know really what embalming is, that is simply the chemical preservation of somebody's body. So, it's using formaldehyde to preserve somebody's body. And if somebody has been embalmed or if any type of formaldehyde has been used in that person's body, what that's doing is killing off all the microbes in somebody's body that's essentially stopping or freezing decomposition. Whereas we're on the other side of that spectrum, we're encouraging the natural decomposition process to return us back to the earth. So if somebody has been embalmed, it's nothing personal, but we cannot have that individual undergo terramation because it is the polar opposite of what we're encouraging. Other considerations are clothing limitations. So woven fiber clothes like we're all wearing here, I assume in this room, any woven fibers don't break down in terramation. So in lieu of that, we use what we call a wisp. And so we'll wrap somebody in, it's just a soft, non-woven cotton gown as they're placed into their vessel. So that allows both for modesty, for when families want to see their person, um, but it can also break down through that terramation as well. Once again, going back to the amount of remains that comes from terramation, it's something that we like families to be very well aware of what to expect. That even though it's not expected that they take the full portion, we do want people to know what they're going to be receiving when their person comes back home to them. And then one thing I'll pick on myself because I'm really good at this is the length of time that terramation takes. I came from traditional funeral service of cremation and burial, where we're very used to things happening fairly quickly. And when I first heard of Terramation and heard this was something that was going to take 2 to 3 months, I thought that was going to be a major issue for families, whereas it's actually been one of our greatest assets with families. That there's no rush to figure out what they want to do with the soil. There's no rush to figure out what they're supposed to do in that time. They have a couple of months to figure out all these different details, and there's no rush whatsoever to go through your grieving, to go through those conversations with family and friends of, what the next steps are. So that length of time we thought was going to be an issue, but it was actually a great benefit for the families that we serve here. All right, so now I'll talk a little bit about Return Home, kind of who we are, and how things came about here. So, as mentioned, we are based up here in Auburn, Washington, but we do serve families all across North America. About a third of the families that we serve come from outside of the borders of Washington. So, it's something that we frequently do to coordinate transportation from one state up here to Washington, at least until we build more facilities over time here. Ultimately, we are a licensed funeral home, as well as a licensed natural organic reduction facility. And I think I've got that coming up here. Yes, we do. Okay. So currently, our facility is about 16,000 square feet, and we have 74 of our primary vessels for that first phase, that first 4 to 8 weeks, as well as 74 of our secondary vessels for the curing stage. So all in all, we do have 148 vessels, meaning we can actively serve 148 families at one given time. One of the benefits being as close as we are to SeaTac, Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, is for all of our families, if they're being flown to Washington, we're about 20, 25 minutes away from that airport that we're able to go pick that person up from the airport and bring them down to return home. Now, Chris has promised that he's going to come and take a tour here in the near future, and I really do hope he does so we can see all of this in person. But we can also do virtual tours of our facility. We're very big advocates for families being able to walk through and see exactly how everything works. Both in person and virtually. You can see all the different vessels in person. You can see the decorations that families have done. And being here in person is adds a lot of knowledge to a lot of folks. We get a lot of questions, so many questions. One of them being, does the facility smell? Like, what does it smell like? And on a bad day, our facility smells like a barn because of the organics that we use. It smells like alfalfa, like straw, like sawdust. So if anybody grew up on a farm here in this room, you would probably love walking through Return Home. It's going to bring back good old memories there. Um, but going back to our starting point, so we started in January 2019, right after Washington had legalized, and built out our facility over 2.5 years. And we had a lot of expectations of what this was going to look like, what our interactions with our families were going to look like. And being in the area that we're in, 90% of people in the greater Seattle area choose cremation. And many of those families choose direct cremation, meaning no services, no visitation, just you go to the funeral home, your person's cremated within a few days, and I bring an urn back in a few days. So we thought it was going to be kind of a similar interaction with our folks, but that was not at all the case. Right now, about half the families that we serve actively participate in one way or another with the Terramation, whether it's them bathing their person, helping place them in their vessel, having services and ceremonies at return home, coming and visiting their person's vessel throughout that time that we're taking care of them. So we have a lot of families that are very active in participating in the Terramation itself, which was amazing to see, but we frankly didn't build a facility for that initially. So behind all these tree screens that you see in this photograph, we have our 74 primary vessels for that first phase. And we didn't have those tree screens. Those just slide to the left and the right, but we didn't have those built when we opened back in June of 2021. So admittedly, we looked a little bit like Costco. And I'm Washington born and raised. I love Costco, but it wasn't quite the environment that we wanted. So that was one of the first adjustments that we made was to make it more aesthetically pleasing. So we put up tree screens, painted murals, added our service space because we saw the incredible beauty that comes in the active participation that Terramation provides for the families that need it. And here's a quick little drone fly through of our front of house facility. So those um, chairs that you see put around the facility for families if they do want to come and visit at any time. We can just slide over those tree screens. Families can pull up a chair, have a cup of coffee, decorate their vessel some more, say a prayer, hug the vessel, do whatever they need to do. So we love having folks coming and participating if they would like to. We do compare ourselves really to a temporary cemetery or temporary mausoleum because we have so many families coming to visit very frequently. So we do encourage that for folks that need that opportunity. All right. So when it comes to return home, right now there are, let's have a way here. There's a handful of facilities, natural organic reduction facilities in the world. I believe there's 7 facilities in the world right now, return home being one of them. So all in all, we're a pretty small club for the time being, but we all do things very differently. Ultimately, return home, we set ourselves aside as the ability to participate. So we're the only facility that is completely open for families to come and participate. Other facilities don't really offer that quite the same. So we do encourage that participation once again for folks that need to. Again, when it comes to personalization of like the vessel, a lot of our families will decorate the outside with photographs, Seahawks flags. There's probably not too many Seahawks fans in here, but we'll have veterans flags draped over the vessels as well, custom art that people have done over the years, knitted blankets, things like that. So we have a lot of customization, personalization that comes with that. Another thing that we do is for everybody that comes into the care of return home, that individual is given a bath prior to them being placed into their vessel. That was something that we decided was immensely important for us individually as professionals. We really didn't want this to just be a name and a number situation of, well, here's Bob and he's covered in all of his own bodily fluids and yeah, you just off we go. That just wasn't something that was at all comfortable to us. So one of the things that we wanted to do to keep the love and the humanity and what we get to do every day is that we do bathe somebody prior to them being placed in their vessel, make sure that they look as great as they can as they're starting their journey to returning back to the earth. When it comes to the vessels themselves, we don't have any types of mechanics that are on the inside of that vessel. The only things that are in there are a temperature probe as well as airflow, so that we're able to make sure that consistent airflow is being pulled in. But there's no other type of mechanics on the inside. It's incredibly simple. At the end of the day, our body is designed to break down. It's designed to return back to the earth. All that we're doing is just creating an optimized environment that we're able to monitor consistently to allow that to happen in a cleaner and optimized environment. Go. Okay, so here's just a couple of examples of some of our family's participation. This was back in 2021. This is one of our first ever families that we served at Return Home. This is one of our many aha moments that this was before we had the tree screen set up. This family came in. They came in probably once a week to spend time with their person. So this was one of those first moments that we realized that this was a lot bigger than just a new process that was made available to people. This was something that offered a lot of personalization, a lot of thoughtfulness that comes into being able to take care of our own people, as we have done as humans for a very long time, but haven't really done culturally in the last 150 years. So that was amazing to kind of see. We're almost seeing kind of this. Going back to the days of us taking care of our own person, which holds a lot of beauty for the folks that need that. And now, looking at the bigger picture of everything, as I mentioned, this is something that has been now legalized in 14 states, including California. So all the dark green states that you see on this map are the states that have legalized, and all of the lighter green states, I think we've actually got to add a couple on this list, but all the lighter green states are states that have introduced legislation. And all this started right here in our backyard of Washington State. Just so to see this amount of progress in, call it 7 years, in a world that we can't really agree on anything, is pretty remarkable to see how rapidly this is progressing. This is not red versus blue. This is something that resonates with a lot of folks. When we opened, this was kind of considered kind of an option for the environmentally conscious, but it is reaching far beyond that point. Hence why we're serving families from across the country. The first families that we served at Return Home were farmers and ranchers. that simply all they wanted to do when they died was to go back to their land. And this was a very simple way to be able to do that. We tend to be a very big hit with gardeners, folks that are environmentally considerate as well. For folks, some folks, it's just the option of freedom of being able to go back to my land. So this is something that is widespread for a lot of folks when they look at how different options work. This is just something that makes sense for a lot of different folks from different backgrounds. When it comes to California, since a lot of the folks here are from California, to give you a little bit of a heads up, California legalized, I want to say maybe about 3 or so years ago, but they left a little bit of waiting period to finalize regulations, which is supposed to happen, I think, at the beginning of 2027. So while it's legal in California, it's not actually available within the state of California because they're still waiting to finalize those regulations. So in the meantime, for folks in California, if a death occurs in those situations, we work with a local funeral home, say in San Diego or Los Angeles or San Fernando, wherever somebody's located, and work with that funeral home for somebody to be brought or shipped up to Washington State. But that's one of the reasons we've had a lot of phone calls from funeral homes and families out of California, as this is something that's coming up very quickly, and the landscape in California is going to change very rapidly as soon as the regulations are set. So for anybody that's likes looking at bills and exciting political conversations, this is something to keep an eye out for because a lot's going to be changing in the next 6 or so months. All right. Well, I think that wraps up everything I had to say on Terramation, about the history, about the process, about return home. Hopefully that was pretty in-depth for people, but please know we like all the hard questions. We like easy questions too, but hard questions kind of get me scratching my brain a little bit. So at this point, I'm gonna open up the chat for people to ask any questions you've got. Nothing is off limits, so. Bring out the big cannons and let me know what you got. Questions, comments, concerns.
First of all, Jake, thanks so much for your presentation. It did go deep, but I think it was well presented, in my opinion. So I'm going to invite everyone to unmute yourself, and let's see what kind of questions we have. Allow. Okay, everybody is. Wait, a couple more people. Go ahead and unmute yourself. Let's see, I'm doing it. I'm trying to do it at this end.
I think people have to unmute individually.
Yeah. Okay. Does anybody have a question for Jake?
Looks like Bill in the chat has a question of cost. So at
Thanks.
Return Home, we wanted things to be very simple. For anybody that's had to set up funeral arrangements in the past, it's not uncommon that you look at a general price list, which is a federally regulated document. And even coming from the professional side of things, it's oftentimes incredibly confusing. So we decided to make things just as simple as possible when it comes to the costs. We have two packages that families can choose from. We have the direct Terramation package, which is $5,450, and that includes everything on the side of Return Home to do Terramation. So that includes refrigeration, transportation within 75 miles of our facility, packaging of the soil afterwards, shipping a small portion of that soil back home to families, certified copy of the death certificate. Um, and so essentially everything needed to do Terramation, with the main exception being if somebody dies in California, if have to be shipped from California up to Washington, we have no ability to control those costs. So if somebody has to go to another funeral home, book an airline ticket, that is an additional cost outside of ours. So that's part of the reason that we're looking at building facilities down in California so people don't have to fly up to Washington. So that is a work in progress. And then our second package is the Terramation with laying in ceremony, which is $6,450, which essentially is just a rental of our service space for a few hours. So it's kind of our version of a funeral for folks that want to use our space. But those are our two packages, is either the direct or the Terramation with laying in. And then Mary Jo says, read your chat from me.
sorry, that was supposed to go to
Oh,
Bill Fowler only.
Oh,
So
gotcha.
nothing from me.
Got it. Okay, no problem.
Thanks for interrupting.
So much for
And
direct.
Bill, read your chat.
I have a
All right, I
question.
will.
Yes.
Um, is there a website where we can look at those prices and the breakdown of
Absolutely.
everything?
Absolutely. Yeah. Give me just a second here. I think I'll be able to just put it in the chat for anybody that wants to pull that up.
Jake, without being direct, I think you made it clear that this is something no one's going to try at home.
It's well, outside of the legal concerns there, there's a lot to go into it for sure. But one could try. I'm not
I
saying
don't,
that's advice necessarily, but
if you have 5 acres and you think you're going to get some hay and alfalfa and use an old refrigerator or something or an old
Don't
bin that you got by the barn, I don't
yeah.
think it's going to happen.
We'll see. It's going to be an interesting landscape coming up here. So I just put our websites, the link of our website into the chat here. If you look it up, it's just returnhome.com. I will give you a heads up. There is another natural organic reduction provider that very much likes to piggyback off of us. So make sure it does say return home. In the website. They do like to use our name as well, so just keep an eye out for that. But outside of that, that's our website right there.
Hey,
And
Jake,
then Dale says, is there any form of death that would preclude this as an option? Yes. There is a short list of diseases that we have to be aware of that would stop our ability to do terramation. Primarily prion-related diseases, such as mad cow disease, Crutchfield-Jacobs disease. And I'm not a neuroscientist by any means, but essentially a prion is a twisted protein that is incredibly sturdy, that if somebody dies of a prion-related disease, they can't undergo terramation because those prions are still considered harmful and active even after this process. So if somebody has a prion-related disease, they cannot undergo terramation, unfortunately. Other examples are active Ebola, active tuberculosis. It's a fairly short list of diseases or forms of death, but there are a couple out there. But as far as other considerations, if somebody, say, has gone under, different chemo or radiation treatments of any sort, that is not a problem whatsoever. One of the beautiful parts of the nature of composting is it does eliminate a lot of harmful elements. That's one of the beautiful parts of composting. We do have to test our soil after terramation for things like fecal coliforms, salmonella, heavy metals, and pharmaceuticals to make sure that that is a healthy and useful soil. But when it comes to some of those diseases, we do need to know of that prior to them being placed in their vessel. Yeah, so there are a few diseases that if somebody's died of those, then they cannot undergo terramation. What do you do if the soil is harmful? So good news, we've served about 1,000 families now, and we've never had an issue with reaching harmful limits of any of those factors that I had just mentioned. But in the worst case scenario, if we do see that there are harmful elements still within a soil, we ultimately will hold on to that soil for a elongated period and just keep testing it until it's starting to show that it's dropped below any harmful levels. So that secondary cube, that curing phase for the second phase, which is typically a month, if we test soil and see that there are harmful elements, we'll leave the soil in there until it's dropped below the harmful levels. But again, we haven't had to do that since we started back in 21, which we're very fortunate for. If there are only 7 places in the world that do this, where are they? Okay, so there are technically 4 here in Washington because Washington was the first place to start it. There is one in Colorado. I want to say there's one in Nevada, one in Germany. Germany's the only other country in the world right now that has a facility. And I think very recently the first one opened up, I think, in Maryland. And then Rosalie says I had to join late. Where does most of the resultant soil go? So for families, if they're not taking, excuse me, if they're not taking the full portion of their soil, we have an 8 acre certified green belt about 20 minutes from return home, right along the Seuss Creek up here in Washington. That for families that can't or don't want to bring their full portion of soil back home, we donate the soil to that site to help revitalize that area. Who or what organization is trying to get this legal state by state? It depends on the state. So some states it's led by funeral directors associations. Some states it's consumer led. Some states, let me think here. I'm trying to think. I think those are kind of the two big ones. Um, I know in Oklahoma they're working on a bill right now, and it's being led by one of the state representatives, but I'm not sure what exactly his connection is. But it's often either state funeral organizations that are working on legislation, and sometimes it's consumers that are pushing for the legislation, which, in my personal opinion, for all that it's worth, both should be working on it at the same time, and working together because there's definitely kind of some disconnect on both sides that don't have the full side of the story. But we're very active when states invite us to participate in that conversation since we are the experts on this matter. So I like, for example, last year I flew out to South Carolina to present to their state organization on what this all is and kind of the legislative and kind of bill aspects of everything. So we are very active in a lot of different states that are working on that legalization aspect. What happened in California? With all due respect, I'm from Washington and I'm going to pick on California. Just simply, it's California is what happened in California. So they legalized, again, I think it was 2022 is what's ringing in my head. And they said, yes, we are going to legalize this. We're getting a lot of people reaching out saying that they want to choose this. So, yes, we're going to appease these millions of people, but we don't know enough about this yet. So, we're going to give it a few years, do the research and development, watch Washington as the guinea pig essentially to make sure nothing's going wrong and make sure they're doing it right. So they basically said, yes, we're going to legalize it. Yes, people want this, but we're going to wait a few years and just kind of see what this all really looks like after, it's been done for a while. And so now it's just kind of a long, drawn out effort of putting together the actual regulations and regulating the types of facilities, who's supposed to run them, things like that. Who would have, ooh, this is a fun one. Okay, I like this question. All right, so who would object to this method and why? So this is not, um, there's really no 100% of any group whatsoever that is anti-terramation, but the biggest area that we have seen pushback from is from certain segments of the Catholic Church. So for the record, the Catholic Church has not come out and said you cannot be terminated. No, no, that has not happened. But there are certain segments of the Catholic Church that, with all due respect, don't understand how cremation or standard burial works, that they don't think terramation shows reverence to a human body. And unless that priest has done an embalming before in their life, I disagree very, very strongly. But really a lot of that just comes down to lack of education on terramation, how it works. And part of that is because of the term human composting, quite frankly, that some people think we're just taking, Grandma June, throwing her in the backyard with eggshells and banana peels and just letting things happen. But that's not at all what's happening. I've helped my share of families over the years with cremation and burial. The amount of reverence that's going into helping people with terramation is bar none, quite frankly, in my opinion. So that's the one area that we sometimes have issues with is, somebody will be talking to their priest or religious leader of some sort, that just doesn't understand how terramation works, at least not in respect to how the other options work. So it's more so just lack of education for the process itself. But that's probably the biggest hurdle that we've had. I remember, I think it was a few years ago now, like the Maryland Catholic Church or something like that came out with a public article and said that human composting was a disgrace because that's what is done with garbage, which is not true at all. Because actually, people burn and bury garbage. They don't compost it. So once again, I've got my druthers about it. But that's kind of the biggest area. So what would be wrong with throwing grandma in with eggshells and banana peels? Didn't we do that for the first 10,000 years? To an extent, but for some people, kind of with the emotional considerations, that's a little bit different. Um, yeah, I mean, some people are fully on board with that. It's just not how we do things.
Dale, are you going to open up your backyard to volunteer space to have a little grandma pit, or what do you have in mind? No? Okay. No backyard. Oh, that explains. Do you have a parking spot? You could put curtains up or something.
Come on, a flower pot will do.
Okay.
It'll have to be a big flower pot.
There we go.
Well, no, you said that, you can take a certain amount of it,
Oh,
you
correct.
don't have
Yes.
to
Yeah.
take, yes, yes, yes. It's like the
Anybody else?
little containers of ashes they give,
Mhm.
yeah.
Anybody else
And you
have a
did
question
mention,
for Jake? Any comments? Questions?
well, I think it's a terrific development. We might start treating the earth and those in it with, some idea of actual respect. And there's another question in the chat.
Oh, yeah. What is the container made of? The primary vessel is a polycarbonate. So it's just kind of a different array of different plastics that are welded together that helps with insulation. So a lot of people ask if our vessels are steel, but we use that polycarbonate instead. It's less expensive as well as a little more flexible and kind of helps with insulation. Do you know if some company in California is ready to go when legal January 2027? Not really. California is our number one area of interest to expand to because we serve a lot of families from California. But ultimately, nobody can really be ready until we get those regulations. Because, for example, they could set regulations that would require return home to change, like the type of vessels we use or something like that. So there's a lot of people that are interested in getting started in California, but until we get those regulations set, there's not really much that you can't really jump the gun too much. So we're just waiting on those regulations to see, if there's any changes that we would have to make or kind of what the state wants to say about it. But we're waiting very wearily on that. I live in a community. Would you be willing to come and make a presentation at one of our weekly convocations? Absolutely. Yep. So I do presentations like this very frequently, so I can do it virtually, really anytime, pretty much. Outside of that, being up here in Washington, assuming you're down in California, I don't make it down there very often. I'll be down in La Jolla in 2 weeks for a state convention, but ultimately, if it is a virtual presentation, I can do these all day, every day. How long would it take to get up and running once legalities are known? For return home, if we don't have to make any major adjustments, which I hope is the case, um, I think our expected turnaround time, depending on where we can fabricate our vessels, probably around 10 months, give or take, to build out the facility, depending on the zoning regulations, build out the facility, build all of our vessels, also depending on how large of a scale that we go, but give or take about 10 months for return home. A state convention of, yeah, it's going to be the California Funeral Directors Association that I'm heading to in La Jolla, and actually doing a keynote speaker for them. What is the most efficient way to contact me? Usually reaching me at my cell phone. I'll put that also in here. So that's my cell phone. I'm pretty frequently on the road, so I'm not always in the office to get the office phone, and I'm not always at my computer. So usually cell phone is the easiest way to get a hold of me. Um, that's usually, yeah, most efficient way.
Anybody else?
What would you consider the
Oh,
competitive environment for your business? It's really interesting. So we've got our benefits, we've got our assets as return home. Ultimately, we are family and employee owned, which is great because we get the autonomy to do what we think is right. We're not beholden to shareholders or people that don't really understand what's going on. So that's kind of one thing that makes things very easy for us. But at the same time, we're not venture capital. We don't have a $50 million, investment that allows us to expand as quickly as we would like to. So it's going to be kind of an interesting area to see how this continues to develop. And we've seen over the last few years here in Washington, but everybody's kind of coming at it with different areas of expertise. So some facilities try to make things as fast as possible. Some people try to make them as simple as possible. So we've all kind of got different areas that we focus on. Our focus is go for the most simple option to allow our body to return to the earth, as well as open doors for participation. Um, but that is one thing that will be interesting to see going forward. Being small family and employee owned is, how we're able to expand. We want to be all over the place, but how are we able to do that as a small company of smaller employees? I'm not sure if that quite answers your question, but would you speak to a church? Absolutely, absolutely. If I'll talk to anybody if they're willing to listen to me. So anything I can do to help there, and I would like to set the record straight to what we were talking about earlier when it comes to pushback that we've received. We've also got immensely positive feedback from all different religious organizations as well. So we've had a couple of Catholic individuals that were maybe not for Terramation, but we've also served a lot of Catholic family members that were devout Catholics and also devout environmentalists that they got support from their parish and things like that. So again, I would like to make it known that it's not like it's set hard corners of this place says yes, this place says no. Um, we've served families from, to the best of my knowledge, pretty much every major religion, and it just comes down to kind of what people's understanding of it is. So absolutely, I would gladly speak to a church or any type of religious organization. What's the most fun part of your business? Oh, I think the most fun that I have, again, coming from cremation and burial, both on the pre-planning side as well as funeral director intern at the time. At that old funeral home, while it was a beautiful funeral home, beautiful cemetery, I don't miss it too much. But one of the reasons, despite serving thousands of families in that setting, I never once had somebody come up and be like, Jake, I'm just so excited to be cremated or to be buried. Like, I'm really looking forward to it. That just wasn't really a conversation that ever happened. But it's actually something that happens very frequently at return home for a lot of people. I hear it all the time that people like, for my entire life, I've always been uncomfortable with the subject of death and dying. And a big reason was because I didn't want to be burned and I didn't want to be buried. So I just didn't really want to face this. But for a lot of these people, they're now reaching out and saying, this is something that I love. This is something that I want to choose now. And so for me, it's really beneficial to see our culture, who doesn't really like talking about death and dying, talk about this subject that historically is kind of tough to talk about and say, this is what I want to choose. And like, I want people to know why I'm choosing this. Comes with a lot of different areas of beauty to say, it's time to talk about this, and this is something that I want to choose, which we've not really done before. A funeral home that does undersea burial, specifically like burial at sea, like you go out 50 miles and place the casket in the ocean. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Because I know of one down in San Diego specifically that does that frequently.
Jake, from just a practical standpoint, you've had the remains of the individual in the vessel for the period of time,
Yeah.
and you're ready to transfer that material into the. You looks like you have the bags or sacks
Mhm.
that you had arranged over there in your facility. Um, you're contacting the family, letting them know that that's the transfer date. I'm imagining, And then at that point, they're coming by, or are you guys taking off the photos and the other little notes and things like that, and you're boxing that up for them, or they come by and they pull everything off, and then you go ahead and transfer the material to the bags.
Yeah, so as we're moving to like the second stage, which is going to signify kind of the last half of Terramation, we'll take off the decorations and set them aside for the family, and we'll let them know we can either have those shipped or, when it comes to come pick up the soil, you can come pick up those belongings as well. But yeah, when we move to that second phase, first we'll let the family know we're now 1 month away from soil being ready to come back home to you. So start, if you have, if you haven't already, start working on those conversations of how much of the soil you would like and what portions. And then yeah, we can either have that family come pick up directly from us, or we can ship that directly to them as well. And then same with the decorations, if that answers your question.
Other than someone being, in Tacoma or the surrounding area, Seattle, and they do choose to have one or more of the, would you call them bags or sacks, or what do you refer to them as?
Yeah, the bags of their soil. Mhm.
Okay, how are they transporting that one bag, the two bag, 12 bags? How have you found them? Are they coming up, driving up in a pickup? Are they renting a U-Haul trailer? How are they
Yeah.
physically moving that stuff?
Yeah, it's actually fairly straightforward. So the full amount of that soil can fit into really any standard sized vehicle. We've gotten the full amount of soil into a Honda Fit before, which is albeit fitting name. So you don't need a massive truck or anything. We've had people show up in F-450 dualies, but you don't need that big of a vehicle to pick up the soil. Um, yeah, it'll fit into the back of any standard sized vehicle.
In all the California arrangements that you've had,
Yeah.
how many of them are the family physically driving up there, or they're having it quote unquote shipped? How are they doing that?
Yeah. So I'm not sure what it is in the water in California, but we've had I think almost 15 families literally drive their person's full body from California up to us here in Washington for like that first phase. We've had that happen quite a few times. Actually, two families are doing it right now out of Los Angeles and San Diego. So yeah, I don't know what it is in California, but we have a lot of folks that are willing to make that trip. But then when it comes to the last point of returning that soil back to family. Once again, yeah, we'll it's not uncommon that we'll have families maybe fly up or drive up and maybe do a road trip back down with their person's soil. But in situations, which is more common than not, that families don't want to, drive 12 hours up to us or longer. If we are shipping the full portion of that soil, we'll book an airline ticket to fit all that full amount of soil and have that shipped to the local airport where the family can pick it up there. But for smaller portions, we can use United States Postal Service to ship out smaller portions.
Are you have access to shipping companies as well, or you just found that people, because 5 bags is a lot, or maybe if there's a big number of bags to be shipped,
Mhm.
airplane. I mean, it could be handled. They ship things all in airplanes all the time, but
Right.
have you ever used a trucking company to ship remains?
Not at this point. I don't think so, no.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah, and one of the complications there, so the reason I said United States Postal Service is actually USPS is the only common carrier authorized to ship human remains, with the exception being, the airlines themselves. So in other words, you can't use FedEx, you can't use UPS, and you can't use Amazon Prime. It has to be United States Postal Service that's shipping the remains. Um, so if it's any type of common carrier that does, drive shipping,
Hmm.
um, they're often not authorized to do so for whatever reason.
Got it. Well, we're just out 10 o'clock, a couple minutes after. One more, if you, Jake, one more call. Any final questions? We're going to let Jake go, and all of you release everybody to have a wonderful weekend. But any last questions for Jake? Okay. Wait, there's
Yeah,
one
there
in there.
was one that popped up in the
Go
chat.
ahead.
Yeah.
Was it regarding the tribe in the Puget Sound?
I think that's the new one.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you've got contacts, by all means, we would love to talk to them. We've been privileged to serve quite a few Native families as well. One of our families donated, well, they didn't donate, but they used their soil to plant 1,500 trees over a salmon creek on native land in the area.
Mm.
So, I mean, we're always open for additional options for families to be able to donate soil to. So, if you've got contacts, by all means, we'd love to get in touch with them.
Jake, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. We thank everybody for attending this webinar, and um, we'll make available a video for you. If you submitted a working email address and not mickey@disney.com, if you submitted a legitimate email address on registration, we're going to send you a link for a copy of this webinar this morning. Any final words, Jake?
No, no, thank you all so much, Chris, for helping get this all set up. Everybody else for listening to me talk for this long, greatly appreciated. I mean, it's we're very excited to have this option available for folks, and yeah, just really excited to see kind of how things expand, especially down to California over the next couple of years.
Terrific. All right, Jake, have a terrific weekend. And anybody else, any questions for myself or the other board members attending before you take off?
We'll see you at the other link.
Well, yeah, we'll see you at the other link. We have a board meeting in a couple minutes. As soon as we wrap this up, wait, we got a couple new ones. Oh, thank you, Lori. So enjoy your weekend, and continue to check out our site for new information and upcoming events as well. Goodbye, everybody.
Well,
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you
Take
again.
thank
care.
you.
Thank you.
Love Washington. That's where I'm from. Keep up the good work.
Most certainly will. Thank you.
Thank you.